Welcome to the debate. What if I told you the mom and pop bakery down your street suddenly has the exact same supply chain processing power, data analytics, and, well, customer support infrastructure as a massive tech giant like Amazon?
I mean, most people would say that sounds completely impossible.
Right, it sounds like a futuristic fantasy, but today, that isn't fantasy. It is an off-the-shelf, cloud-based software subscription. The artificial intelligence revolution is fully shifted from experimental laboratories into everyday production-grade infrastructure. And, it is landing directly on the desks of local small businesses.
Yeah, and that is exactly where the tension lies. You look at that bakery and see a sudden influx of enterprise-level power, but we have to ask ourselves, what happens to the baker in all this?
That's the real question.
Local commerce operates. We are looking at a profound shift. And frankly, the stakes for these tiny operations couldn't be higher.
Which brings us directly to the central question we are exploring today. Does the democratization of AI truly level the playing field, transforming these small local businesses into highly agile, highly competitive operations? Or, does it merely shift the burden of their labor from physical tasks to complex digital tool orchestration, redefining the absolute baseline of survival without actually closing the gap with the major corporations?
Right. It's the difference between giving someone a sharper axe and forcing them to maintain a complex chainsaw just to stay in the forest.
I love that analogy, but I'll be arguing that AI is a revolutionary democratizing force. I view it as a lean growth engine for micro-entrepreneurs.
Okay.
By turning fixed-cost labor into a flexible, scalable digital layer and compressing administrative tasks that used to take days into mere minutes, AI allows solo entrepreneurs to access the exact same predictive capabilities and 24/7 responsiveness that were historically reserved for corporations with massive budgets.
Mm-hmm.
It essentially allows a single person to comfortably run operations that previously demanded entire departments.
Well, and I will be taking the opposing view. Because while these AI tools are undeniably capable, I argue that they do not inherently level the playing field. They merely raise the floor.
Raise the floor, right?
Yes. True competitive advantage in today's landscape requires orchestrating multiple autonomous AI tools into intelligent workflows. And this is a highly sophisticated operational burden that risks stretching micro-entrepreneurs way too thin.
I see.
And perhaps more dangerously, it risks stripping away the localized, personal touch that is the very foundation of a small business's value proposition.
Okay, let's start with the most constrained, unforgiving resource for literally any micro-entrepreneur: time.
Always time.
If you're a solopreneur listening to this, you know exactly what I mean. The evidence from our source material illustrates that AI is rapidly becoming the most powerful lever ever invented to compress time across daily workflows. We are talking about the automation of routine back-office administration, categorizing expenses, tracking billable hours,
Right. Processing inbound invoices.
processing invoices, drafting routine vendor emails, all of it.
But let's be precise about what that automation actually looks like in practice, because it's not magic.
Right, so let's look at the mechanism. Previously, a human had to read an invoice from a supplier, recognize that QTY meant quantity, copy the numbers into a spreadsheet, cross-reference it with a bank statement.
And flag discrepancies. Yeah.
Exactly. It was pure mechanical data entry. But today, large language models don't just read the text, they understand the semantic context. An AI agent looks at a messy PDF, understands conceptually what a line item is, extracts the data perfectly, and updates the ledger instantly.
Sure, in a vacuum.
But that means a solopreneur is no longer spending their Sunday afternoon manually reconciling a ledger. They are reviewing an AI-generated summary over their morning coffee in 5 minutes. This time compression fundamentally shortens feedback loops, allowing the business to move from reactive, exhausting firefighting to proactive, forward-looking strategy.
I come at it from a different way. You are describing the automation of isolated tasks, which, sounds wonderfully liberating in theory. But the reality of implementing this technology into a living, breathing business is much murkier.
How so?
Well, the frontier, as the material points out, is not just smarter individual tools, it is smarter coordination between tools. Setting up these systems requires integrating APIs.
which are essentially the digital bridges that allow two completely different software programs to talk to each other.
Right, but those are getting easier to use. Easier, maybe, but it still requires managing autonomous agents that execute multi-step projects. That requires a massive amount of oversight. The birding hasn't disappeared. It has just shape-shifted from manual labor to systems architecture.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. AI for a small business right now is like the introduction of the commercial electric mixer to a local bakery a century ago.
Okay, let's hear this.
When the mixer arrived, it didn't invent the recipe, right? And it didn't replace the baker's unique localized taste. It simply automated the grueling, repetitive, purely mechanical task of kneading mounds of dough. Because the machine did the heavy lifting, the baker could focus entirely on flavor profiles, business strategy, and chatting with the customer at the counter. You don't need to be a mechanical engineer to use a commercial mixer, just like you increasingly do not need to be a software developer to use AI workflow engines.
I hear what you're saying about the commercial mixer, but I think that analogy actually proves my point.
Really?
Yes! A commercial mixer stays in the kitchen. It operates in a single physical bowl. An AI workflow engine, on the other hand, operates across the entire nervous system of a business.
Well,
It touches the inventory, the bank accounts, the customer database, and the public-facing marketing channels all at once.
but that interconnectedness is exactly what makes it so powerful.
It's what makes it powerful, yes, but also what makes it incredibly fragile. When you build end-to-end processes that trigger actions based on user behavior or incoming data alerts, you are essentially programming a digital employee.
Right.
And digital employees can fail in spectacular, non-human ways. If an AI agent hallucinates, meaning it confidently fabricates false information and drops an incorrect pricing term into a client contract, the business suffers actual material damage.
Sure, there are risks, but
Managing a network of AI assistants that handle research, content creation, and customer interaction requires the business owner to become a full-time systems manager. They are spending their precious time troubleshooting those digital bridges and refining text prompts to get the AI to behave, rather than baking the bread.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. You are looking at the friction of early adoption and assuming it's a permanent state.
I think it's an inherent state.
But the abstraction layer, the interface between the human and the code is getting better every single day. We aren't talking about small business owners writing custom Python scripts in a terminal window anymore. We are talking about no-code interfaces.
Yes, no code.
These are platforms where you use simple drag-and-drop building blocks to create a process, and increasingly, the AI itself suggests and optimizes the workflow. It adapts over time instead of static, brittle templates.
But no code is still logic. Drag and drop logic is still a logic tree. If a local owner doesn't understand the underlying flow of their own data, a drag and drop interface just lets them build a flawed system faster.
I'll grant you that there is a learning curve, absolutely. But mastering that logic pays unprecedented dividends, which brings us to the most critical part of this debate.
Which is?
If a business owner reclaims 10 or 20 hours a week by letting an AI handle the back-end plumbing, that reclaimed time has to go somewhere, and typically, it goes directly toward how the business interacts with its customers.
Yes, the customer experience. And this is exactly where the risk of adopting these tools is the highest.
I completely disagree. I argue that AI actually amplifies the personal touch rather than replacing it.
Amplifies?
Yes. Think about the mechanics. The material shows that AI-driven support agents can provide 24/7 basic support. If a customer messages a local florist at 11 p.m. asking if they deliver to a specific zip code, the AI answers instantly.
Right, for simple queries.
Because the AI is handling those high-volume, low-complexity interactions, the human staff are freed up. They are no longer exhausted by answering the same 5 questions 100 times a day. A small business owner can now combine human warmth for complex relationship building with AI-driven speed for basic logistics. That deepens customer loyalty without needing a massive customer service department.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The premise that you can use generative AI tools to handle your customer interactions without diluting your unique local identity is deeply flawed.
How so?
Let's look at how these systems actually work. Generative text tools like large language models draft prose by predicting the most statistically likely next word based on massive data sets.
Right.
By definition, they are designed to produce average, highly standardized, perfectly native-sounding prose. They inherently homogenize.
But you can prompt an AI to adopt a specific tone or persona. You can tell it to be folksy or professional or, I don't know, quirky.
A statistically average version of quirky is still an average. If a local hardware store relies on an AI to generate its marketing copy, draft its weekly community newsletters, and handle its customer support chats, it risks losing the very authenticity and distinct voice that differentiates it from a massive, faceless e-commerce giant.
I think you're overstating the loss of voice.
The source material explicitly warns us about this trap. The absolute best outcomes emerge when people treat AI tools as co-pilots rather than replacements. If you automate your unique local voice, you simply become a slightly worse, slower version of a big box store. Customers aren't stupid. They can feel when an email was written by a machine.
Well, I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're assuming authenticity only exists in the manual keystroke by keystroke drafting of a newsletter. You are equating friction with warmth.
I wouldn't call it friction. I'd call it effort.
Let me push back here. Isn't it inherently more authentic and frankly much more respectful of the customer's time to have a small business owner quickly resolve a critical shipping issue via an AI-assisted workflow in 2 hours, rather than making that customer wait 2 agonizing weeks because the solopreneur is buried in manual spreadsheets?
You're comparing a functional shipping update to the entire relationship. Of course, a fast shipping update is better, but that assumes the AI is only handling shipping updates.
The warmth of a small business is in the outcome, the reliability, and the strategic human interaction when it really matters. It's not in the manual typing of routine communications.
But the material notes that marketing teams and now time-starved solopreneurs lean on AI to generate endless copy variations, testing visual layouts, personalizing ad campaigns at scale.
Which is incredibly efficient.
When you start generating realistic video scenes, voiceovers, and soundtracks from pure text prompts just to market your local business on social media, you are outsourcing your identity. You are letting a machine dictate your brand.
Only if you don't oversee it.
And managing these so-called personalized productivity partners requires massive editorial oversight to ensure alignment with your actual values. The human touch doesn't thrive here. It gets buried under the exhausting responsibility of editing a machine's endless output.
But see, that editorial oversight is precisely the mechanism that elevates the business owner from a mere tactician to a high-level strategist.
A strategist?
Yes, they are no longer laying the bricks, they are designing the building. They are setting the goal, providing the context, and curating the final output, which naturally shifts our focus from how small businesses talk to their customers to how they make their internal high-stakes decisions.
You mean back-end strategy?
Exactly. Historically, micro-entrepreneurs have had to rely heavily on gut instinct. Why? Because they simply couldn't afford a team of data scientists to analyze their sales trends. They guessed what would sell based on memory and intuition.
Sure.
Today, AI-powered dashboards digest sales data, customer behavior, and market trends into clear, actionable insights almost instantly.
You're talking about predictive analytics.
Yes, and the mechanics of predictive analytics are where the democratization really happens. Traditional software requires you to explicitly tell it the rules. For example, if it rains, order fewer sunglasses.
Right. Standard programmatic logic.
But predictive AI models find invisible correlations across massive data sets that a human wouldn't even think to look for. The AI might realize that a slight drop in barometric pressure, combined with a local high school football game, reliably spikes the sale of a very specific brand of comfort food. It then automatically adjusts the wholesale order to meet that invisible demand.
It moves from calculation to cognition.
Precisely. Tasks like forecasting demand, Managing inventory and optimizing pricing are no longer guessing games. This helps the local retailer avoid overstocking, which dangerously ties up vital cash flow, and understocking, which results in empty shelves and lost sales.
True.
This continuous adaptation of pricing and risk scoring improves their profit margins without constant manual recalibration by the owner. This is the definition of a level playing field, because the local corner shop now possesses the exact same analytical rigor as the multinational retail giant.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered what those massive enterprises are doing with this exact same technology at a structural scale?
What do you mean?
You are looking at the small business in a vacuum, celebrating their new dashboards. Yes, the local shop can now forecast demand using an affordable cloud subscription. But simultaneously, the multinational corporation is deploying bespoke AI to dynamically route global supply chains in real time.
Well, sure.
They are accelerating chemical material discovery. They're using advanced computer vision systems, literally cameras hooked up to neural networks to inspect products for microscopic defects on factory lines at thousands of units per minute. They are using autonomous vehicles in warehouses to navigate and pick goods without human intervention.
But a local neighborhood boutique doesn't need computer vision factory inspection to compete for its local customer base. They aren't manufacturing microchips. They're selling local goods.
They don't need it for their own internal operations, no. But they compete in the exact same macroeconomic environment where consumer expectations are entirely dictated by those giants. The baseline of modern business infrastructure has simply been elevated. The material points out that AI is no longer a future trend. It has become part of the basic infrastructure of commerce, much like the internet did 20 years ago.
And the internet was a massive boom for small businesses.
Was it a level playing field, though? When the internet became ubiquitous, it didn't inherently make the corner store more competitive against multinational chains. It just meant the corner store had to pay for a website, manage hosting, and figure out digital marketing just to survive.
It gave them access to a global market.
AI is doing the exact same thing. It is a new minimum requirement. It is not a level playing field. It's a raised floor. If you fail to integrate AI into your local business today, you aren't just missing out on a bonus, you are actively being outcompeted by those treating it as a core operational layer.
I agree that it sets a new baseline, absolutely. But I argue that the leverage it provides disproportionately benefits the smaller player.
Disproportionately? How?
Think about the math. When a massive multinational corporation adopts an AI, they might shave 3% off their global logistics cost. It's a huge absolute number, but a small relative margin.
Right.
But when a solo entrepreneur adopts an AI workflow engine to handle lead follow-up, document generation, and bookkeeping, they are effectively doubling or tripling their workforce at zero marginal cost. They are moving from a raw idea to full market execution in hours instead of weeks. That doesn't just raise the floor, it massively compresses the distance between the floor and the ceiling. It turns a small business into a lean growth engine that can scale its revenue and its reach without automatically scaling its headcount or its physical footprint.
I deeply dispute the idea that it doesn't scale complexity. As the material notes, these applications are handling millions of interactions with reliability and uptime requirements on par with any other core infrastructure.
Yes, they're robust.
If a micro-entrepreneur is relying on an AI to handle fraud detection in their e-commerce store or to dynamically price their services based on demand, they are taking on immense operational risk. They are blindly trusting a black box.
That's why transparency tools are being developed.
But a large corporation has entire IT departments and compliance teams to monitor those systems for routing errors, data corruption, and model drift. A micro-entrepreneur has only themselves. When the system breaks, they have to fix it.
Which is exactly why the shift toward multimodal interfaces is so incredibly crucial right now.
Multimodal interfaces.
Yes, the text highlights that we are moving away from rigid text boxes and toward multimodal AI, systems that can see, hear, and read at the exact same time. You can hold up your phone camera to a broken piece of hardware in your shop and literally ask the AI out loud, "What part is this and how do I reorder it?"
Sure, that's convenient.
It is. The interface is combining text, images, voice, and real-time context from sensors. This makes these tools feel drastically less like complicated software that needs managing and much more like collaborative partners smoothly embedded into the everyday life of the business. The technology is finally adapting to the human, not forcing the human to adapt to the code.
But treating software as a collaborative partner is exactly where the risk of losing operational control lies.
I don't see it that way.
You begin to trust it like a human, but it fails like a machine. If the real competitive advantage of the future is knowing how to orchestrate multiple tools into intelligent workflows that consistently solve real human problems, then the micro-entrepreneur is no longer competing on their craft. They are essentially competing on their ability to be a digital systems integrator.
Well, to summarize my position in light of our deep dive today, I believe AI is the ultimate democratizing lever for the modern micro-entrepreneur.
Fair enough.
By automating repetitive back-end work, compressing complex decision cycles through predictive analytics, and shifting the owner's focus from low-value manual labor to high-value strategy, AI allows a small, local team to effectively do drastically more with less. It eliminates the fatal guesswork in inventory and pricing, provides enterprise-level 24/7 customer support, and allows local businesses to scale their revenue without taking on the massive risk of scaling their headcount. It fundamentally empowers the solo operator to punch far, far above their weight class.
Powerful, revolutionary new infrastructure layer. But we must strip away the utopian marketing and recognize it for what it truly is, a highly demanding operational burden.
Right.
While it offers impressive capabilities, it requires rigorous orchestration, constant editorial oversight to maintain brand authenticity, and an entirely new, deeply technical skill set in systems management. It raises the baseline for basic survival, forcing local small businesses to adopt complex, fragile digital workflows just to keep up with consumer speed expectations set by large enterprises.
The raised floor.
Exactly. And most critically, if not managed with extreme deliberate care, it risks stripping local businesses of the authentic, localized human identity that makes them truly valuable to their communities in the first place.
We certainly find significant points of convergence here. We both clearly agree on the source material's fundamental premise that AI is fully in production today.
Absolutely.
It is no longer a fun lab experiment. It is actively functioning as a basic operational layer for commerce, much like cloud computing or the internet itself.
Yes, we completely agree that the technology is proven enough to handle real money, real inventory, and real consequences. And we also firmly agree that the true competitive advantage moving forward lies not in simply owning or buying the tool, but in how thoughtfully the business applies it to their specific workflow.
Exactly. Where we continue to diverge is on the net effect of this massive shift. I view it as a profound equalizer, disproportionately empowering the micro-entrepreneur to close the operational gap with much larger rivals.
Right.
You, on the other hand, see it as setting a new, highly demanding and somewhat perilous minimum requirement for business survival that directly threatens their core local identity.
Correct. The core tension we are left with is between unprecedented digital empowerment and dangerous technological dependency.
And this reflects the broader challenge and really the immense opportunity presented by this technology. The true task for any small business owner right now is learning to harness this leverage creatively and responsibly to solve real human problems. There is much more to explore in the source material, particularly regarding the future of those multimodal AI interfaces we touched on, which might change how we interact with these complex systems entirely, making them as intuitive as speaking to an employee.
Indeed, the technology will inevitably continue to evolve at a breakneck pace. But the human element of local commerce, the direct connection, the community roots, the authentic voice, that will require incredibly deliberate protection from the owners themselves.
As we think back to that traditional neighborhood bakery or the corner hardware store we discussed at the start of our conversation, perhaps the ultimate goal isn't to use AI to remove the human friction entirely. Perhaps the goal is to finally give the owner the power to choose exactly where that human friction belongs. We leave you to form your own conclusion on whether the local businesses of tomorrow will simply be exhausted managers of complex machines, or if they will finally be free to focus entirely on their craft.